Hi guys, and welcome back. So we're going to get into doing the software, and this time nothing is going to stop us. So anyway, the machine is here ready to go. I'm going to stick it up. I'll show you the insides of it and give you a little bit of a rundown about what's inside this machine. It's very basic, and we'll take it from there, eh? So as I say, grab a snack, a comfy chair, and don't forget the drink, and let's get on with it. Okay guys, so here we have it. I've got a nice little, this is the HP 14-inch, 15-inch. You've seen this before when I was doing my light bulb tester. That's what this was on. And it has the PFC in it, which made it flash. I have a Logitech PS2 keyboard that I had kicking around, an old one of those. And I have an old compact PS2 optical mouse. And all these work under DOS 95 and 98 because they are hardware supported by the machine. So what I'm going to do is I'll turn this on. You may just see me stick my hand inside to flick that fan a fraction to get it to start, because as I said, that fan's getting a little bit lazy. I need to replace it, and it'll just take a couple of seconds for this to go through its boot sequence, and then the screen should go to green, which it has. The light's just gone green, so this should come up shortly. And there we go. We've got our 300 megs of RAM in there, and it's just going through and looking at all the hard drives. Now this is a bootable floppy disk of DOS 622 that I had made up some years ago, and DOS 622 or any of the early versions of DOS will always come up and ask for you for a date and time, so we just skip those. The date and the time is correct on this from when I finished doing the BIOS. As you can see on here, it's DOS 6.22. What I'll do is I'll just show you, this is just a basic boot disk that I had. And what I have got on here are the two extra files we need. The XF disk, exe, and its INI file. Now we need these because when we boot up, the normal DOS F disk doesn't give us options to play around with stuff in the BIOSes and that of the hard drives. So we need something that's going to put a bootloader in that will allow us to hide and unhide partitions and things like that as we're playing around with them and setting them active or not. It's a little bit to get your head around, but if you follow what I do, it shouldn't be too hard. If you get lost, send me a message or tag me in the link in the description down below, and I'll help you out if I can. So as you can see, this is a standard boot disk I made. It's just got standard things like edit, format, xcopy, check disk, defrag, stuff like that. It's basic bits and pieces that are on it. It's a 1.44 disk, so it is a high density 3.5 inch, and that gave me enough room to dump these two extra files on. Now they're not huge, so you could use a standard DOS boot up disk from an installation, exit out of it, stick in a separate floppy disk with these two files on it, and run it from that. Without any further mucking around, what I will now do is, the hard drive is in here. This is a 20 gig. I think I've got in here for showing you guys. I've already set one of these drives up. Didn't want to destroy that, so I put in another one. It's a 20 gig. Let's hope the drive is good and that we can get this to work. What I'm going to do here now is I'm going to run the XF disk, which it just stands for extended fixed disk, because you need the disk to be blank, so no partitions on it. Wipe the partitions, doesn't need to be formatted, nothing. This will do everything for you. So what we do is we run the program, and that will load and run for us. Now because we're putting DOS on here, we want it to be the first partition that we have, because then each succession after it is another partition. Now you want to go from your lowest operating system to your highest. XP and 98 are a little bit different if you want to run both of those together. There's a little bit different way of doing that because XP tends to want to overwrite 98's boot partition. So there are ways to fix that. So anyway, what will go on here, and it says that XFDisk uses the following options from its INI file and command line parameters to hide partitions from each other. And this is how we set it up. We set one operating system up on one partition. So we set the partition up, set it active, we exit out, then we put the install disks in, and we boot up, and we do it off the install disks, then we reboot into the software, hide it, make the next one. So you'll see as we go along. So we just say OK on this. Now you can't quite see the top of the screen, but it's saying that we have, it does see 20 megabytes of software. So we have a free drive of 19093 megabytes. So what we're going to do is we're going to press enter on that. And what we want to do is make a new partition. I'll see if I can get this a bit further out for you guys so you can see. There we go. That's better. Right, so I'll just go out of here. Alright, escape takes you back. But as you can see there, that's our basic hard drive. It's free. It's a 20 gig drive. So DOS will only see 2 gigs. So that's what the first one's going to be. 95 is about the same, I think, unless you use some sort of drive software. 98 can take a lot more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, yes, I want to make a new partition. And so, yes, we do. And we want it to be a primary partition. And then it's going to say, well, how big do you want this to be? So we only want it to be 2 gigs. For it to be 2 gigs, that's going to have to be 2047. So we do that, and we go enter. Start from the free space. And this is where you can set it to make partitions at the front or the back of the drive. It's a nice piece of software. You can play around with it. Do you want to initialize the partition area? Necessary for formatting, etc. for DOS and Windows. And then we go, yes, we do. Do you want to initialize the whole partition area? So this is of that 2 gigs we're doing. Yes, we do. So now you see we have a 2 gig partition, and there's one that's not there. So we're going to leave this like this, and we're going to exit out because we need to install DOS 622 on this first partition. So we're going to go exit out of here. So we want to hit F3, and it'll say, do you want the partition table of the hard disk to be written now? And we go, yes, we do. And it's going to build our partition for us. So this may take a little bit of while to do, guys, because it's not going to be blindingly fast. So we just have to wait our time and let it do its thing. Hi guys, we're almost finished, and there we go. So it says, do we want to restart now? And what I will do is I'll pop the disk out. So that's just the disk I had for booting it up with. And I have a set of 622 floppy disks. And I'll pop the first one in. And we'll get it to restart. So what it should do is it should reboot, start up DOS 622. And then what we can do is we can go through the DOS installation. When that's finished, we need to go back into the software. So that's why I booted off a 622 disk to do the setup before I put on the software itself. And so it's picked up our partition, and now it's going to go through and format the drive for us. Then once she's finished formatting, it'll install DOS. This shouldn't take too long. So we'll just leave everything standard, and we go yes, and then to DOS. And what we'll do later on is once we've got DOS set up, we will put the XF disk into its own folder on the DOS boot partition. So we'll make a little folder and call it tools, and what we'll do is we'll copy the XF disk into there, that and its INI file, so we have it there all the time if we ever need it. Because all the DOS utilities will be put onto DOS in its own folder. And there we are. So we have DOS 622 installed. So what we need to do now is we need to go back and boot up into the version of DOS that we have on disk and go back into XF disk. So Control Alt Delete for those of you who don't know it. We'll generally do a soft reset on the machine and put our floppy disk in and then let it boot up off our floppy disk. Now you could also make up a CD with all these files and utilities and that on it and boot up off that if your machine has the option to boot from CD and do all the setup through just off the CD. It makes it a little bit quicker rather than off floppy drives, but this is for authenticity. Okay, so now we're in here and we got that one done. What we need to do is we need to go into the utilities and we need to hide that partition. So when we hide it, it's now going to think that there is no partition in there if we rebooted the machine. So what we do is we go into here now and we go to the free and we make a new partition. We make a new primary partition. Now this being Windows 95 I think can handle 4 gigs, so 448, so that would be 447. Do that, start from the free space. Now what that is saying is that start from the next empty sector of the hard drive to make it from there. So yes we do. Do we want to initialize it? We go yes we do. And so now if we go to exit, it'll say, do you want to write it? And we go, yes we do. And it's going to build the partition. So now what we would need to do is once it's built the partition, is we need to put the Windows 95 CD in the drive and reboot. And if it's a bootable 95 CD, we should be fine. And it should, so long as your machine has been told to start from CD. Now this is told to check A, then for a hard drive if it's bootable, and then the CD-ROM drive. So we can go into the BIOS and change that to go straight to CD-ROM drive. But we'll let this go through and do its partition first. Okay guys, so there it's all done, and it now needs to restart for it to be able to make the changes. So what I'm going to do is to restart, but I want to stop it because I have to put the CD in the drive, and because it's on its side and not sitting upright, the discs are a wee bit fiddly to put in. So what I'll do is I'll do this, and then I want to stop it before it boots. Right guys, so we're ready to put Windows 95 on now. I have got the CD in the drive, and that's the one I was telling you about, the Super Win OS one. You'll see that come up in a minute. I've changed the BIOS to boot from CD first, and that's the boot screen that comes up with the Super Win OS bootable CD. So this is the one I was telling you about. So it's got to start with 9598 CD, DOS with CD-ROM support, PC DOS 7 with CD-ROM support, NT. And what it's going to do is, if you don't press anything, it's going to want to try and boot off the hard drive. It will default out to that. That's something we could have a look at some other stage. But I'll restart it so I can go into that option and get it to boot, and we'll go into the 95 setup. And I think this was Win95C that it has, and Windows 98 SE. And sorry about the screen there. This screen is getting a bit buggered too. That's why the colours are not very good. But it does enough for what I need it to do at the moment. So we press number 1, and we want to boot from the CD-ROM. And then it says, what do we want to put on? Now we want to start Windows 95 from CD-ROM. And this is where it'll go through and it'll load up like it used to with the startup disk you had. Okay, and because it wasn't formatted, it didn't actually go into the Windows startup. So this is where we tell it to format the C drive for us, because we went through and set that partition to 4 gigs. So we'll go through and we just format this partition up, and then we can go in and tell Windows to reinstall again. And by that, we generally, in this directory, just type setup, and it should go through and install Windows 95 for us. It's alright, I got the pain with me. Say hello. And so what we do is, once this is done and it's installed, and we let it reboot to finish off setting itself up, there will be drivers for Windows that will need to be put on for this machine, which we can do at a later date. They don't have to be done right now. And then what we can do is boot back into the floppy disk and go and set up that last partition for 98. And then what we will do is install 98 on it, and then we've got to go back into that menu one last time, and that's where we set the startup menu, which you will see shortly. I won't bother putting a label in for it. And then as we do, we just type setup in the Windows 95 directory, and it will go through, and now it'll go through and install itself. Now, if you did have a PC which will boot from CD-ROM from start, you could do the DOS installation in that from the CD. So what we'll do is, sometimes you can do typical or portable on this, but I generally like to do custom. And okay, and what I do is, when I'm doing custom, I can select to put on and what not to put on the machine. And there is some stuff that Microsoft chucks on these which is of not much use, so I like to uncheck those so it doesn't put them on. But it is totally up to you. With these, once you've installed Windows, you can go in and add and remove stuff afterwards. I just find I know what I do and don't want, and so I can leave stuff out when it starts up. Because there's things along emailing and that sort of stuff under 95 and 98, which is of not much use nowadays, so I leave that stuff out. If I'm going to do the internet or anything like that, that's where I'd look at going XP or 7 or something along those lines. But a lot of these old machines, you don't want them on the net anyway because of security reasons. Okay, so now we just let it install itself after making the selections we want. If you wanted to, you could have left the defaults, and that would have put on modem and internet and stuff like that, which, as I was saying, the machine's too old for security reasons to be going on the internet, so I'm not going to worry about that. If I need networking later on, I can set that up under Windows 98. Yep, and then it's going to go through and boot up. Now we probably, it's going to try and start up the CD, but I think if we press the escape bar, it'll actually, once it gets to that menu, the escape button, it will allow us to exit out and run from hard drive. So what happens, guys, is that you may have forgotten to make that partition active for 95 to carry on and boot to finish the installation. If that's the case, just reboot into the software off the floppy disk, run the XF disk, and then once we get into the XF disk, go to that partition. So we go, okay, come to this partition, press on here, and make sure it is set to active. So there'll be an option in there that'll be set to active. So I'll just now see how it says it's inactive. That's what it means. So what you'd need to do is you need to go into it and then tell it to be the active partition. Then save this, exit, and reboot, and take the floppy disk out, and it will carry on and finish going into Windows and finishing the 95 installation. And of course you say yes, and then it would exit out, reboot, and then it would go into Windows 95 and finish off the installation for you. Now there's nothing to worry about with it, something going wrong with it. It is because it can't see the partition and boot from it. You can also fix it if it's still not working for you. There may have been something about the way you did it, but you can, once you've set up all the partitions and set the boot menu up, you can then boot into the one and finish off the installation that way. So I'll go back into here and we'll go back into the CD-ROM support of the floppy, and we'll boot up the XF disk again. And what we'll do is, we'll say we couldn't get in and finish off the 95 installation. I'll show you how to go through and finish up the menu so you can. It's only at odd times you'll get this problem. The other thing is that if you're doing bigger than 512 megs of RAM and bigger than, I think it is a 120 gigabyte hard drive, there are a couple of little files you need to install that allow the software to manage those bigger drives and the more memory. It just to sort out handling those is what the add-in files are you need to run. It just patches things. So anyway, we'll run xfdisk. If you read the documentation with the xfdisk, you'll actually see what I'm talking about, having to run the two little patches that fix those problems. Right, so what we'll do is we'll go into here and we'll do the last one. And I'll leave it the complete size for 98. I want to hide that one. Make that, and we want to show it. Because we're working on the partition, it needs to be shown and it needs to be active. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to use it. Okay, so now those are done. We will now exit out of here, and yes, we want it to update. And this will go through and initialize that part of the partition for us. And then when we reboot, we can reboot into either the CD and do the installation, or we can reboot onto the floppy disk with CD-ROM support and copy all the files into a partition on our hard drive and then install from that, which will be a little bit quicker than doing it from CD. Generally your hard drive is faster than your CD-ROM drive, but some of them not by much. But anyway, we'll let this finish and then we'll carry on. Right, so we do the same thing. We go, yes, we want to reboot. So what we do is we can boot up off the floppy disk. This is the other way I was telling you can do it if you don't want to pull it off the CDs. And sometimes it's easier and better to have a copy on your hard drive if you've got the room for it. So we'll just let this boot up. And the nice thing is if you use a 98 boot disk, if you get one, they generally have drivers on it for loading up most of the generic IDE drives. And it also makes a ROM drive with utilities in it for 98 that are really helpful if you ever need any. And you can install 95 with the 98 boot disk as well, because so long as you don't systemize the drive, 95 doesn't care what you're booted with. And the nice thing is the 98 one, as I said, gives you that CD-ROM drive support. This has a lot of extra things in it that I had set up back in the day, so don't worry about that. So now what we will do is we will now format the hard drive. And because it is the only drive we have, it'll be fine to format because we're not going to overwrite any of the others because they've been hidden and they're not active. We'll go yes, and we'll let that go through and format that drive. When that's finished formatting, we will come back, make a folder for 98, copy it from the CD-ROM into the folder, and then launch the installation from that folder. And then once we've finished that, our last step is to boot back into the software again, into the xfdisk, to set up our boot menu. So we'll let this go. This shouldn't take too long. We'll let this go and finish its installation. Okay, so now we're finished, so we'll give it a name. Win98. You see, little caps. There we go. That name. Right, and so now what we can do is if we do a dir, you actually see, that's on the A drive, sorry. So if we go to C, go to dir, and you'll see there's nothing on the drive, so we'll make a directory, which is md, and we'll call it Win98 cd. And what you do, if you want to copy from one place to the other without putting the path in, you change to the directory you want to copy to, and also you change to the directory on the drive you want to copy from. So what we'll do is we go to E, and on E I know it's in, if we do a directory on E, this is the CD-ROM drive, and it's under the Win98. So if we go into that folder, CD Win98, and then from there, then what we do is do copy space star dot star, and then space C colon, and that will remember where on C drive we last were, and that's going to copy all these files onto the C drive for us. And it just means that when we go to install it, it'll be a lot faster than pulling them off the CD-ROM drive. Okay, so we're all done. So now if we just go back to C drive, we don't need the CD and the ROM drive, and we won't need the floppy drive after this either. But as you can see, it's taken us directly back into the same folder we're in. Now if I do a dir widthwise, or directory with a widthwise listing across the screen, as you can see, all the files have been copied into it. So now all we've got to do is run setup from here, and yes, and let it go through its checks, and then yep, we are fine with that, and let it go through and do its installation. Go continue, and this won't take long to go through and install either, guys, so we'll let it go through and do its thing. Now if you want internet access with 98, you can enable that if you want. I don't think I really want it on this machine myself. I'm just using this for archiving and things like that. So what I'll do is I'll actually use it for the USB. I'm not going to worry about going on the internet as such. I'm not going to worry about networking it. I do have a hub in here that I could plug this into and network to it, but then I can't really use it through DOS, and I can't really use it through 95. Now same again, I'm going to do custom with this, and we'll call this Win98 for our user, and I don't want the accessibility. Accessories. Now what you can do, if you're not sure what's in these, if you highlight it and then go details, it'll tell you what it's actually got. And as you can see, there's things like briefcase and calendar and so forth. And what you can do is you can go through and actually untick the ones you don't want. So I'm sorry, I can't really see the screen on the top there. It's pretty hard for me to see, but I'll do my best. Now I don't want briefcase, calendar, yes, wallpapers, yes, document template, games, imaging, mouse pointers and paint, quick view, screensaver, Windows scripting host and WordPad. So I want all those. The only one I'm not worried about is briefcase. So, and if you don't know, most of your keyboard shortcuts on Windows are the tab and the space bar, and to go backwards with the tab will take you clockwise. If you hold down shift and hit tab, it'll take you anti-clockwise. Just a little bit of a thing for you to see. Well, we don't want address book. No, so we don't want that. So we want to turn that off. Are you sure? Yeah. don't want well, in communications, this is one of the ones you might want to look at. If we have a look in details, now I don't want the dial-up, so I don't want dial-up networking, but there is cable connection. Those are things for like lat link and fast link, and if you want to do parallel or serial connections. And hyperterminal is another one you're probably going to use. So if you're going to use any of that old stuff, you need it. So we don't want chat. Net meeting we don't need. Phone dialer we don't need. So we're not going to use a lot of these. VPN we don't need. So we do want the hyperterminal. We do want direct cable. We don't really want dial-up networking. Okay, so we've got to have that turned on, obviously, to have the dial-up networking. So now what we can do is if we use tab, you'll see it's changing the icons down the bottom. If I use shift tab, it'll go from cancel back to OK. So we go OK. And so now that's communications. Desktop themes, if you want a bit of colour in the background. Internet tools, I think that is. We don't want those. We want multimedia support. We want turn that off, turn on, put all of the multimedia on. We don't want Outlook. System tools, we'll put all those on. We don't want web TV. So that's everything we want. So what we do now is we'll just tab around to our next icon. And go next. And we'll keep that, and we'll keep that. And this is where you change where you are. And we're in the end of the world, so we're in New Zealand. So we need to come up to N. There we go. We go New Zealand. We go next. And it's going to ask us to make a startup disk. I don't need one, but it'll complain that I have a disk in the drive. I'll take that out. And we'll go cancel because I don't want to make one. And then we'll go next. And this will start copying the files into the Windows directory so that it can actually set up. And then we have it, Windows 98. So I'll go into the, as we did with 95, open up the computer icon, and as you can see there, the only drives it sees are the two floppy drives, the hard drive, and the CD-ROM drive. So this is that software is actually showing us to Windows there is only one drive in the system that it needs to worry about. So what I can do now is, this is the last time we're going to need to shut down. And what we will do is we will get it to restart and boot into the floppy disk. Pop the floppy disk back in the drive, and this is the last, as I say, the last time we do need to do this. Unless you haven't turned on the active function on the drives when you were installing on the partitions. Now we didn't need to start it with CD-ROM support because we don't need it for this time round. We're only going to log in and run the XF disk to set up the boot menu. Right, so now we do is XF disk. Okay, and so now what we want to do is we want to set whichever one you want to be your main boot partition. So you can set these in whatever order you want to, from 1, 2, 3, however many partitions you got. So I want it to be the DOS 622, and so if I go to that and I made that active, and now if I go into install boot manager and then enter again, and I can put in a new boot manager entry. And so what I want to call this is my DOS 622. Go enter, and you can see that one there has gone to DOS 622. And in this one I put a new boot menu entry, and this is my Win 95 C. That's Windows 95 C, revision C. And then the last one, our third one, is going to be our Win 98 SE, second edition. And so then what I do now is I go up to here and let's go see where I am. Set my startup options. Now there's all sorts of things in here you can do, and usually just have clear the screen and simple menus. You can do all sorts of things. You can password stuff, you can password floppy drives. There's all sorts of things you can do, but those are all I want. You press the escape key, it drops you up one menu. Unhide. That's, and the next thing you got to do is unhide the partitions. And now we exit out, and it says, do you want to update? And we go yes, and yes, and yes. So now that will update everything for us, and it should reboot the machine. We pop our floppy disk out, and now what will happen is the machine will boot up with our boot menu. And here is our basic boot menu, and from here it'll time down to how long you have, and that's in the settings. You can set that, and we can select what one we want to run, so 98, 95 or DOS 622. So if we highlight DOS 622 and press enter, it boots us into DOS 622. In which we have DOS 622, and then if we reboot, it should boot us back into the menu, and you can do a soft reboot or a hard reboot. It doesn't matter which one you do. I'm just sorry this monitor's not very good in giving you the colours. And when we want to, we can go down to here and we go, yeah, we'll go Windows 95. And there we are, we're in Windows 95. So if we tell it to restart, so down here we go shutdown, restart the computer, and then this should shut down and restart us back to the menu again. And then from there we can select 98 SE. So as you can see, it's quite easy to jump from one to the other. The only thing we don't have is access to the other partitions. And that is just the way the software works, and that it's enabling which one is active and bootable at which time. So we come down to 98. Now the nice thing is too, if you do have parallel ports on your machine, you can use something like LapLink or FastLink. If you look for them on the internet, probably in the Wayback Machine or the Internet Archive, you will find copies of those. So LapLink or FastLinks and they work on parallel or serial port transfers. And it's not too bad if you're only copying floppy disks over. So if you mirror image or do a couple of dumps onto DOS, then you can fire it up under DOS and do a transfer from this machine to your newer machine, and then put them onto USB or CD or whatever you'd like to put them onto. But there we are, we're into Windows 98. Now these operating systems do need the drivers and that put on them. For 98 and 95, I don't have the drivers installed at the moment, but what I will probably do is for 95 and 98, because they work with CDs, I'll probably use a CD-ROM, or I do have a zip drive, an internal zip drive that I could hook up to IDE as another drive, and then I could use that for dumping all the drivers and that over onto the machines. So guys, that is us, and that is all done. So now I will shut this down and restart it, and I think I'll go into DOS, and I think then we need to look at doing the software for Dave Dunfield's drive image. See you soon.